Let's go over how to grade FRQ number 2. So in the old AP test, and again 2019 was the last year of the old AP test, the math question was always number 2, and it's always only half of that question. In the new test, our math question is number 3. It's going to have the same kind of math. So the writers of the test and the developers at the College Board have assured us that the math types will not change. They will not get more difficult, but now students are able to use a calculator. So you can have a calculator handy. Now, so you know, this question was designed to be done without a calculator, but you're welcome to use a calculator. And when I assign these to students, I do let them use a calculator now, even though the questions were designed to be done without a calculator. Okay, so go ahead and if you have the PDF document, what we're working with today, and I'll write these down for you, is we are on the PDF working with pages 4, 25 to 28, 33, and 34 in the PDF document. So if you are using that, you can go ahead and access those pages. If you have access to a printer, the ones to print are 27 and 28, 33 and 34 today. So if you can print those, it's very helpful because then you can highlight it and have more of a kinesthetic model today. So go ahead and pause the video, access these pages, and also go ahead and read the prompt. And on the prompt, you'll notice that only half of it is math. So students have always been scared of math FRQs, and I have to tell them all the time, do not leave a math FRQ blank. It's only half math. Okay, so going back to this, go ahead and read the prompt and go ahead and read the scoring guidelines, which are on page in the PDF document. It's pages 25 and 26. If you have the printed copy, go to the scoring guidelines for question 2, which is pages 25 and 26. And then we're going to go ahead and grade the first sample. So the scoring guidelines is 2 pages long, and then starting on page 27 of the PDF or in your printed packet, look for sample. It's here at the top, 2D. Oh, I have them out of order. We're going to start with 2A. So the 2 samples we're going to do today are 2A and 2D. So go ahead and access those. On the PDF, this is pages 27 and 28 and 33 and 34. So once you have all that ready and you've read through the prompt and you've read through the answers, you can begin to grade if you want, or you can turn back on the video and grade along with me. All right, go ahead and do that now. Let's take a look at how things are graded for this question. With question 1, the video, I forgot to have you pull out this on the video, although I believe I told you to do that before you watch the video. I gave you a link for this. This is my paper that I give to my students to use for about the first half of the year, and they get to have this out during the exam. So it's a method of scaffolding. I don't expect them to memorize how to write an FRQ perfectly the first time or the second time. And over time, I tell them to not use this as a crutch, but to begin to memorize what they're supposed to do for each of these task verbs. Let's look at some of these reminders for writing. It says to always write in complete sentences, and you're going to see that sometimes it doesn't matter and sometimes it does, and there is not a big consistency. It's always been in the directions, and in years past we've enforced it, and in previous years we've not enforced it as much for identify questions. So I always, as a safe bet, just teach them to write in complete sentences. And here are the other things that I teach them about when writing FRQs. So make sure that you read through those at your leisure. And then these are our tasks, verbs, and what we need to do for each task verb. Okay, so let's take a look at this student sample. This is student sample 2A. The first question, identify one ecological benefit other than providing habitat that is provided by forests. And so this person wrote, forests provide oxygen to humans through the process of photosynthesis, which allow them to breathe. This is no points, and let me tell you why. In our class, we have a couple of distinctions that I reinforce all year, and I especially reinforce right before the AP test. An ecological benefit is for nature, not for humans. Humans, the benefits are called ecosystem services. And so this person wrote about an ecosystem service, not an ecological benefit. And so that's the reason why this person didn't get this point. Even though on the rubric it says things about producing oxygen, it's really talking about it for nature, so animals can breathe oxygen, not humans. And I know that's a picky thing, but the students have to show they know the difference between an ecological benefit, an ecosystem service, and an economic benefit or problem. Next one, B, the question asks for to identify. So in an identify question, they just need a real brief answer. And this person wrote, forests provide a source of lumber which can be sold for profit, also creating jobs in the process. So this person wrote more than they needed to. They wrote more of a describe, and that's okay. You can write too much as long as you don't contradict yourself. If students end up contradicting themselves, then they actually lose that point. So it's not in the student's best interest to keep writing and writing and writing. Okay, so in an economic question, you have to write an economic vocabulary word, and the word jobs is a vocabulary word, and also sold. So source of lumber that can be sold. So that's an economic term. Lumber is actually an economic term as well. If he or she or they had just said wood, that would, and not sold. So if they had said forests provide a source of wood, that does not count because there's no economic term in there. Okay, next question. Describe two economic, let's write our numbers in the side. So when I grade these for students, or if we peer grade for one method, I put the scores in the side. All right, C is worth 2 points. Describe two economic consequences other than those related to the loss of boreal forest habitat that result from the extraction of bitumen and the transportation of synthetic oil to customers. Oil spills during transportation can occur, which greatly displace animals, kill many others, such as birds who can no longer fly due to being covered in oil, and block sunlight from entering the ocean, leading to less photosynthesis. Also, CO2 is released due to the massive machinery that's used in the process of extraction. These machines are powered on gas, which then burns, releasing CO2. This increases global warming as CO2 is a greenhouse gas. Okay, let's talk about this. Beautiful answer. Let's look at our scoring guidelines here. Oh, I forgot to check the scoring guidelines for B, and it's here, forest products, timber, medicine, nuts, etc. Okay. So oil spills, is this part of the rubric? Here it is, pollution of surface water and groundwater from oil spills and leaks during transport. Now, if you'll notice on the scoring guidelines, the scoring guidelines is more, a lot of them are bullet points in identify, but that's because the scoring guidelines would be pages and pages and pages long if we put every describe possible. So when we grade AP tests, we know that pollution of groundwater from oil spills is an identify. We want to read some more description, and if they have that extra description, then they get the point. So he has a lot of extra description, extra information, and a lot of specific information. So for this person, oil spills during transportation, they displace animals, kill many others, block sunlight. I mean, frankly, all of this is a good description of what oil pollution in the water does. Okay, so that's one point. And this person, they wrote more than they needed to, and that's okay as long as you don't end up contradicting yourself. But also realize, let me go back up to another point. Let's look at B again. Another thing to teach students is that they need to provide only the amount asked for. So for example, B says, identify one economic benefit provided by forests. So they wrote 2. They wrote selling lumber and creating jobs. We only count the first one. This is different than many other AP tests, like some of the AP history tests. They will read and read and read and read, the graders will, and keep grading them. And so the more you write, the more possibility you have to earn the points. That is not the case for us. Let's say this first answer was wrong and the second answer was right. They would still earn 0 points because the first one, we asked for 1 and the first one was wrong. Now we continue to read to check for contradictions, so it's not in their best interest to keep writing. So only write the number asked for. I tell students, well, what if you write something that's weaker and then something stronger? Cross out the weaker one so that the first answer ends up being the stronger one. All right, going back to C, another environmental consequence is CO2 released in the atmosphere. So it increases global warming. So let's talk about this a little bit. Releasing CO2 is not the environmental problem. Climate change or global warming is the environmental problem. And a lot of times students forget this. So one of the hints that I constantly tell them is that don't stop and assume. If you write just about CO2 being released because the machinery is burning fossil fuels, that's not the environmental problem. Climate change is the environmental problem. So you just wrote kind of half the answer, not the whole answer. So always attach increases global warming. All right, so they earned 2 out of 2 for C. Let's go on to the math. You'll notice that they put out all of the zeros. Now, this isn't something that we have to worry about as much now with calculators, but a lot of my students, they take numbers that are in scientific notation and they take it out of scientific notation into zeros, which is okay, but it's very easy to make a mistake with zeros. You'll notice that the givens up here actually are not scientific notation, they're in words. And this is another skill we need to teach our students. We need to teach them that a billion equals 10 to the 9th. They need to know this. And a million is 10 to the 6th. So in the Google Drive for our class, under the first week items, I have a math diagnostic with a bunch of videos and help for students. And so when we study our math, I am going over this with them. So this person knew how many zeros are a billion, and they did their math great. So they wrote out their zeros, which is actually what you needed to do for this. And they put their units in their work and units in the answers. So notice here that you have units, 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 and this is how you get full credit, because you'll see on the rubric, there's a point for the correct setup and a point for the correct answer. It says units are not required in the answer, but they are required in the setup. And even though the rubric here is in scientific notation, it doesn't have to be for the students. It's okay. So for D, they earned 2 out of 2 for D. For E, here we go, for E, they also earned the full credit of 200 years, and we check this with the answer. The scoring guidelines, sorry, and you can see on the scoring guidelines, beautiful. And units are in the work and units are in the answer, so 2 out of 2 points. The next one, now you'll notice that here there's multiplication X's here, and they're not here, but that's okay because that's an appropriate way to write the math. And the answers are completely correct for this. So 2 out of 2 points. I'm going to tell you right now that getting a 9 out of 10 on a math question is rare. You're going to have those students who can do that, but to be honest, most do not. So this is 9 out of 9 points. Oh, I'm sorry. They lost a point. It's 9 out of 10 points. So let me get out of my strange light situation here. All right, there we go. 9 out of 10 points here for this math FRQ. And again, that's a very high score for a math FRQ. Most of my students, even if they're really good students and they're scoring 8, 9s, and 10s on the other FRQs, a lot of those same kids, they don't score quite as high on the math FRQ. So to get a 9 out of 10 is unusual for a math FRQ. I'm gonna actually scoot over this way on my desk. I'm on an old desk. You can see all the scratches. It's an antique desk that was passed down. And it's the one I work at from home with the COVID shutdowns. All right, and so now I'm out of the light coming through the blinds. All right, let's go on to the next example. So if you would like to now try it on your own, if you haven't yet, go ahead and pause the video and then restart when you're ready to see if you graded it correctly. All right, let's go on to the example, question 2, example D. Letter A, so this person wrote an ecological benefit of forest would be the large amount of resources like food and shelter for the animals living there. And yes, they wrote about animals, which is nature. And so this does match here, providing food for organisms on the scoring guidelines. So food and shelter for the animals living there. So they receive 1 out of 1 for A. For B, the large amount of lumber that can be sold to make heat, furniture, and other goods. So yes, lumber that can be sold. Beautiful, 1 out of 1. E, erosion from the worksite and the newly exposed ground, also pollution in the groundwater from runoff from the worksite. Okay, so this is almost right, and I had to think about this one myself, and if I was at the reading grading this, I might ask the person next to me or perhaps my table leader to check this one out, because it's really close to being right, but it really in the long run is too vague. First, we have no soil erosion, And it's really vague. Erosion from the worksite and newly exposed ground. The prompt is asking for some sort of extra description, which is not here. And there is no specific pollutant measured, like sediment pollutant or other toxins that are used in the process of bitumen extraction. So there are no points earned here for C, and that is the reason why it is all around too vague. Okay, let's look at D. So D, if you look, he or she or they have the right answer, but they forgot units in the work. So there's no units in the work. So what they did was they gave them a point for the correct answer. Now here's a little bit of a situation I want to explain to you. So if you just have a correct answer, but your work is not correct, you get 0 points. But their work is correct, it just forgot the units. So in this case, they would get 1 out of 2 because they proved they knew how to do the math, they just forgot the units in the work. Here, the math is all wrong, so there's no points here for E. For F, it's the same thing. No units in the work, but the math is correct, but they had units in the answer. So 1 point for the answer with the units here. And so when you add up these points, they earned 4 points out of 10. That is actually an excellent score for a math FRQ, believe it or not. Now, we don't know quite what the cutoffs are for the new AP test, but on the old cutoffs, about an average of 4 out of 10 on each FRQ is a passing score, as long as you do correspondingly well on the multiple choice exam. And I say it's an average. You don't have to earn that on every FRQ, but as an average. So that is FRQ number 2.